So I think most people out there probably know that you and I are not much for public transportation or ride sharing. Thus the motorcycles, right?
Yeah.
But China has got quite a robust public transportation system, and the fact that it's kind of like a really big one-party state means that kind of laws and projects kind of get in action very quickly. So you see a lot of big projects that kind of shape the way that people get around China, and there's something really interesting that just came out.
Okay, so, you spoke about different kinds of transport, and yes, things like high-speed rails get built really quick here, and that's because they don't have to really go through planning committees and stuff, and, like in the West, get approval. It's just like, we want to do it, we can do it. So everything does happen very quickly here. Now, there's a huge story about Uber and how Uber pretty much failed here in China. I want you to tell that story, and then we're going to get on to a very new form of ride sharing that's happening in and around the big cities here in China. So how about you go ahead and talk about Uber?
Okay, well, Uber actually, I'm gonna say it was a success story in the beginning because of how well they played the Chinese market. Now, to kind of get the Chinese public opinion, you got to kind of work with things like which way are we going?
Left.
Okay, you got to work with things like bargains, right? And a lot of companies know that if you give Chinese people free stuff, then they're going to latch on, right? And that's exactly what Uber did. They started off giving all these free coupons so that people could get free rides, to kind of embolden the company to take some big market share in China, and it really worked. But why did they suffer $1 billion loss?
Well, you know what it did? You know what it actually worked at doing was getting people used to the idea of ride sharing.
Yeah,
etc.
Well said.
Anyway, continue.
Anyway, so why did they lose $1 billion in market share? Well, the reason being is that, this story is kind of a repeat of how a lot of companies in China. But basically what happened was all of the kind of ideas, rights, software, all this kind of stuff was stolen by a company, or I'm going to say copied by a company called DiDi Dache. And DiDi Dache is just China's homegrown version of Uber, right? Now, they were kind of also emboldened to take over the American market, or at least try to take over the American market, because they got so much money from Apple.
Oh yeah, you know why? It's because Apple was trying to curry favor with the Chinese population, populace, and also the Chinese government, because Apple was kind of seeing huge hits in their sales because of the whole sort of South China Sea political thing and all that. So
people breaking their iPhones.
Yeah, so people were smashing iPhones and being very anti-America, anti-Apple. So in order to kind of win people over, Apple did this massive thing. They may have other reasons, but we live here, we know why.
Yeah, of course, of course.
Anyway, yeah, so continue. So they got a huge amount of funding from Apple, and of course, one thing you forgot to mention is the fact that all the Uber offices were raided, and they were kind of made for a short time illegal. The government was like, hang on, what are you doing here? They shut down their operations. However, did the same happen to the DiDi company?
No, actually, they've been wildly successful here in China. I don't know how well they're going to do in America, but absolutely have completely taken over. Now, used to hear people for a while, even after they stopped using Uber, in Chinese they would say, hey, let's get an Uber, right? Now everyone says, let's DiDi. I'm going to DiDi here, I'm going to DiDi there, right? They pretty much, it's just DiDi Dache now here in China.
That's correct.
This happens all the time. It really does. You've had companies like Xiaomi that have completely copied all the technology from GoPro and
Apple,
different Apple and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So it's not out of the ordinary. Anyway, that's the kind of negative side of this. I wanted you to talk about something that you've noticed happening in Shenzhen, which is actually quite cool.
I will. There's one other thing I just wanted to finish up on the whole DiDi thing, is that, when Uber got raided and all that, DiDi was allowed to continue. And, it's obviously because they're a local company and they don't face the same sort of restrictions that an international company does. Which is, the homegrown companies will always have the advantage here on home turf. Makes sense.
Yeah.
And also, Uber's prices were just too much. They were too expensive, and DiDi undercut them a lot. So, for the average Chinese person, they're not going to pay more if they can pay less. So that's another reason why they did so well. Anyway, it turns out Uber had to pull out and sell everything, to basically cut their losses and sell all their infrastructure and everything to DiDi anyway. So DiDi kind of took them over. Now, in Shenzhen, I've just made a video about it. I'm going to put a link here. There is this new, it's not only in Shenzhen, it's in all the first tier cities, and there's something similar in a lot of the second and third tier cities as well. And it's this bicycle sharing situation that's going on.
Yeah.
Now a lot of people on my video said, oh, but that's been around like in London and France and other countries for years and years and years. The difference is that all other bike sharing systems have like a docking station, right? So there are designated places you can go to get a bike. You have to like unlock it with your credit card or something. You go ride it and you have to park it at another designated spot.
Right.
Whereas these ones, you can just basically, if there's one over there, you can unlock it with the app and cycle to wherever you want, and as long as you don't leave it in a locked compound or like in the middle of the street, I mean, there are a couple of rules, you can leave it pretty much anywhere. So it's free, like you got a lot of freedom there. You don't need to worry about returning it to a base station. So it's something very new and very innovative as far as I'm concerned. Yeah. What do you have to add to that?
Well, I mean, I feel like a lot of things like this in China take off because there's so much, you know, especially with the explosion of the economy, there's a lot of startup companies like this.
Yeah.
And honestly, this kind of bike sharing thing kind of goes against the normal actions of citizens here in China. And I mean, that's, you know, public property is not usually taken care of here. People only typically care about the things in their own home or their own property, right? So you see a lot of, you know, we talked about this before, poor maintenance and things like this, because the idea or attitude is kind of like, it's not my problem. I think it's an amazing idea, and I think it's really, really cool, but I do maybe foresee some problems in the future with, you know, the bikes being stolen or mistreated. And you mentioned some really interesting things, like the taxi drivers are locking them, right? Because they're losing business and things like that.
Well, okay. First of all, they have built something in. Hey, what if we go up there? What's up there?
You think so?
Should we?
What's up?
Well, okay, I'll just go around then.
Yeah. Hold on, I wanted to mention this. This is the motorcycle graveyard.
Oh, really?
Right here.
Okay,
and,
we'll take a look.
I remember when I got one of my bikes taken by the cops, I had to come here to come fetch it. But they have like hundreds and thousands of motorcycles in this big plot of land, they say.
Let's not ride in there because they might not let us out.
You did. Absolutely correct.
Anyway,
for sure.
they've got a little thing, an incentive. Like if you report a bike that's been damaged or, you know, whatever, you get a coupon. So you get like a discount on your next ride. So I think they understand how the Chinese mentality works, and they understand that if they want their bikes to kind of still stay in good shape, that they need to have a kind of a reward system. I see that backfiring. I can see people damaging them on purpose and then like saying, hey, look. You know what I mean?
There will be problems, but overall it's cool.
But you can only get a discount to ride one of those bikes, so I guess there's no point in damaging it. You're not going to get money out of it, right?
Yeah.
Yes, you know, you get these illegal sort of e-bike taxis.
Yeah.
And they're very upset because obviously they're losing all their business to this ride-sharing thing. So they're doing things like vandalizing the bikes, throwing them over the walls of like lock compounds, locking them, getting like cheap bicycle locks and locking them to fences and stuff. It's quite funny. But I think it's a fantastic idea, and it's just, you know, this whole idea of like ride-sharing and you know, crowdsourcing everything's really taking off here in China. You know what I mean?
And I think, I mean, it's an absolute necessity because we're in a situation right now where people can afford cars, and it's pretty much the worst thing that could ever happen in China. When it was poor enough to not have cars, everything was fine, but now when you have like over a billion people able to drive, dude, like it's awful. I mean, it's gotten to the point where I actually just don't like driving anymore.
No, me too. Especially after returning from the States, I just don't want to use my car. I literally want to set it alight.
So anything that has to do with or tries to alleviate this traffic, you know, nightmare that we have here in China is definitely a step in the right direction for sure.
Absolutely correct. Well, I guess that pretty much covers it, really, doesn't it? So is there anything you'd like to say to our subscribers before we sign off?
Well, whether you you know, put a blow-up doll in the passenger seat of your car to take advantage of the carpool lane, or if you use ride-sharing apps like Uber, then I hope you don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you don't like, comment, and subscribe, I'm glad you made it this far into the video. And that means that above all else, you are absolutely awesome.
Yeah, yeah.